No one ever lasted more than a week. They called him the unbreakable patient, a billionaire sheik whose rules were as cold and hard as the steel tower he called home. For 14 nurses, his gilded cage was a revolving door of failure and humiliation. What they didn't know was that his walls, built from grief and guarded by a massive fortune, were about to come crumbling down. And it would all be thanks to nurse number 15, the one who decided to break every single one of his rules. In the highest penthouse of Dubai's most formidable skyscraper, a space that felt less like a hospital and more like a kingdom, lived Sheikh Khalid Al-Jamil. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a god's-eye view of the city he'd helped build, a sprawling testament to his power. His net worth was a number so big it was spoken in whispers, like the distance to a far-off star. But inside these walls, all his wealth had bought him was a sterile, silent, and suffocatingly perfect prison. The sheik, a man in his early 50s, had the sharp, assessing eyes of a hawk and a jawline set against the world. He was fighting a rare and cruel autoimmune disorder that was methodically attacking his body. The prognosis wasn't good. Science could only manage his decline, not cure it. His body had betrayed him, so he responded by trying to control absolutely everything else. This control came in the form of a set of impossible rules for his private nursing staff. The job paid an astronomical salary, the kind that could change a family's fortune overnight. But it was a poisoned chalice. The world's best agencies sent their most decorated nurses, and one by one, they all broke. The first, a stoic German man, was fired for making accidental eye contact. The fifth, a cheerful Australian, was sent packing for humming while changing an IV bag. The 14th, a top specialist, quit after just 4 days, calling the environment medically impeccable and humanly impossible. The penthouse staff, a small, terrified army of managers and chefs, spoke of the sheik in hushed tones. They said he didn't want a caregiver, he wanted a ghost, an automaton who would do her job without leaving a human trace. He was a man drowning in grief so deep that the slightest ripple of another person's humanity felt like a tidal wave. His rules weren't just quirks, they were fortifications. And into this fortress of silence, a new candidate was about to walk, a woman who came not from a world of luxury care, but from the loud, chaotic hallways of an American public hospital. Alina Harper was not the nurse you'd picture in a billionaire's penthouse. Her career was forged in the fire of an underfunded, overworked ER in a city that had forgotten what prosperity felt like. At 34, she had a calm, observant face and hands that never seemed to be still. She developed a quiet dignity, not from privilege, but as a shield hammered out over years of hardship, loss, and the raw, unfiltered chaos of human suffering. She had seen it all. She'd held the hands of the dying, celebrated with new mothers, and calmed terrified patients. She knew that behind every chart and every difficult demeanor was a person who was scared to death of losing control. Her superpower wasn't a fancy degree, it was a stubborn, unwavering empathy. She believed healing wasn't just about medicine, but about connection. It was a philosophy that often got her in trouble, but it was the only way she knew how to be a nurse. The job offer came when she was at a crossroads, completely burned out and buried in student debt. The recruiter's call felt like a prank. The salary was life-altering, enough to clear her debts and finally give her aging parents the security they deserved. But it was the patient that hooked her. "No one can handle him," the recruiter warned. 14 of the best have failed. They say he's unbreakable. Where others heard a warning, Alina heard a cry for help. She'd met plenty of unbreakable patients before. They were always the most broken. They built the highest walls because they had the most to protect. She saw a man trapped in a gilded cage, and the challenge wasn't about following his rules, but figuring out why he needed them in the first place. Against everyone's advice, she took the job. She packed one suitcase and flew to a city of impossible towers, heading for the quietest, most challenging hallway of her career. Her first day felt less like an orientation and more like a military briefing. The penthouse was a stunning monument to minimalist luxury, vast expanses of marble, glass, and steel, but utterly devoid of life. No photos, no books, no personal touches. It was as sterile as an operating room. The household manager, a woman with a permanently worried look, handed Alina a leather-bound folder. Inside were the 7 rules. You will not initiate conversation. Speak only when spoken to about medical care. You will not make direct eye contact. You will not touch any personal item. You will maintain a distance of no less than 5 feet at all times. You will not bring any personal items into the residence. You will not display any emotional expression. Your presence is functional, not personal. Do not forget that. Alina read the list twice. Each rule was a brick in the wall she'd pictured. This wasn't a job description. It was a manual for how to become invisible. She looked up at the manager and saw the pity in her eyes. "He is a very private man," the manager whispered, as if the walls were listening. "Just follow the rules. It's the only way." Her first encounter with the sheik going exactly as prescribed. He sat in a large armchair, staring at the city below, and didn't turn when she entered. She announced her name and started her first task, checking his vitals. She moved with quiet efficiency, eyes down, hands steady, a ghost in scrubs. He didn't speak a single word. For the first few days, Alina followed every rule to the letter. She became the automaton he seemed to want, but the whole time, she was watching.
The first rule broke almost by accident. On day 5, as Alina prepped a new IV, a worn book of poetry slid off a side table and fell to the floor with a soft thud. Without thinking, she bent down, picked it up, and placed it back on the table. The silence that followed was deafening. She'd just violated rule number 3. She froze, bracing for the inevitable. "Leave it," a voice rasped, as cold as breaking glass. She straightened up slowly. In the window's reflection, she saw his eyes narrowed, fixed on her. She met his gaze for a split second. Rule number 2 shattered. Her heart pounded. This was it. She took a breath, her voice quiet but clear. "My apologies, Sheik. It seemed a shame to let it lie on the floor." She expected him to erupt. Instead, there was just a long, heavy pause. "Continue with your work," he said finally, his tone clipped. He didn't fire her. That tiny act of not firing her was a crack in the fortress. It told Alina that maybe, just maybe, the rules weren't so absolute. The next day, she pushed a little more. While checking his blood sugar, she spoke without looking at him. "The forecast says a shamal is coming in tonight," she said calmly. "The sky should be incredible." Silence. Just as she was packing up, he spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "The dust obscures the view." It was a simple statement, but it was a response. It was a conversation. Rule number 1 cracked. Over the next 2 weeks, Alina continued her gentle assault. She wouldn't shatter the rules, but she'd chip away at them. She'd comment on the light or the music playing faintly in the background. She started looking at him directly when explaining a procedure, her expression one of open, professional sincerity. Each time he'd stiffen, but the sharp retort she expected never came. He would just watch her, his dark eyes a mix of irritation, confusion, and something else she couldn't quite name. The staff watched in terrified awe. The American nurse was still there. She was breaking all the rules, and somehow she was surviving. Alina was trained to observe people, not just monitors. She noticed the slight tremor in his hand when he thought no one was looking. She saw how his gaze would drift to a stark, empty space on a marble table, a space that seemed to ache with absence. But most telling was his reaction to sudden noises, a distant siren or a door closing too loudly. He would flinch as if bracing for an impact. It was the reaction of someone living with deep, unresolved trauma. One evening, she saw him staring at that empty space again, his face a mask of such profound sorrow it took her breath away. Looking closer, she finally saw it. 2 faint circular outlines in the fine dust on the tabletop, where picture frames must have once stood. She finished her work, but instead of leaving, she paused. "Sheikh Khalid," she began softly. He didn't move. Grief is a heavy burden to carry alone. His head snapped toward her, his eyes blazing with fury. "You know nothing of my burdens. Stick to your duties." "My duty is to care for my patient, all of him, not just the parts on a medical scan. The silence in this room is louder than any ER I have ever worked in.
It's the sound of something screaming. He was on his feet in an instant, stalking towards her until he stopped just short of the 5-foot barrier. "You are dismissed," he seethed. "Pack your things. You are done here." Alina held her ground and simply nodded. "As you wish. But before I go, you should know that a fortress can keep the pain from getting out, but it also keeps the healing from getting in." She turned and walked out. As she packed her bag, convinced she had failed, the door opened. It was the household manager, her face pale. "The sheik, he is asking for you." Alina was walking a tightrope and it had just snapped, but now she was being called back. She was about to face a crisis that would either destroy her career or prove that her stubborn belief in human connection was the only thing that could truly save him. If you believe compassion can break through any wall, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell because you won't want to miss what happens next. When Alina re-entered the room, the rage was gone. In its place was a tense, electric stillness. The sheik was back in his chair, pale, a fine sweat on his brow, breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. "What is it?" she asked, her nurse's instincts kicking in as she rushed to his side, the 5-foot rule forgotten. "Nothing," he wheezed, "side effect of the new antibiotic." Her eyes shot to the monitor, heart rate spiking, blood pressure plummeting, red flags. She clipped the pulse oximeter to his finger. His oxygen was dropping, fast. "You're having an allergic reaction," she said sharply with authority. "Anaphylaxis." The specialist said to wait. "Monitor," he gasped, his throat starting to constrict. "We don't have time to wait," she countered, seeing the telltale swelling around his lips. "We need to administer epinephrine, now." Just then, the on-call specialist burst in, a nervous man clearly intimidated by his patient. "We must be cautious," the doctor stammered. "Given his cardiac issues, epinephrine could trigger a heart attack. Protocol suggests—" Alina whirled on him. "Protocol? His airway is closing. He'll be in full cardiac arrest before your supportive care does a thing." The sheik was now struggling for every breath, a wild panic in his eyes. He was losing consciousness. He wasn't a billionaire anymore. He was just a terrified, dying man. "I need the EpiPen," Alina commanded. "I cannot authorize it," protested the doctor. "The risk of doing nothing is death," she shot back. She saw the emergency kit, grabbed the EpiPen, pulled off the cap, and plunged it firmly into the sheik's outer thigh. "Call the emergency team at the hospital downstairs and tell them we are on our way. Now," she yelled at the frozen doctor. For a few terrifying seconds, nothing happened. The sheik went limp. The heart monitor let out a long, terrifying beep. But Alina was already moving, beginning chest compressions. "Come on, Khalid, stay with me. You don't get to give up now." Then, a shudder. He took a huge, ragged breath, like a man breaking the surface of water. The monitor screamed back to life. Color flooded his face. His eyes fluttered open. He was alive. Defying protocol and overriding a specialist, Alina had just saved his life.
The crisis passed. By dawn, the sheikh was weak but stable. His carefully constructed world had been shattered, and he'd been saved by the one person who refused to obey its laws. Alina was finishing her shift, expecting a one-way ticket home for her insubordination. She was about to leave when his voice, quiet and hoarse, stopped her. "You are not dismissed." She turned. He was watching her, his eyes clear and lucid, the hardness gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability. "Why?" he asked. "Why what, Sheikh?" "Why did you do that?" he clarified. "You went against the doctor. You risked everything. Why?" Alina walked back towards his chair. "Because his protocol was going to get you killed," she said simply. "My job isn't to follow a checklist, it's to keep you alive, and sometimes that means making a difficult call." She paused. "And I wasn't going to let you die." He held her gaze, and for the first time there was no anger, just a deep, searching inquiry. The wall of rules was designed to keep humanity out, but it was a bold act of humanity that had just saved his life. He finally saw the truth. His rules were a shield against connection, but connection was the only thing that mattered. A new quiet settled in the penthouse, this one peaceful.
The sheikh recovered quickly, but the change in him was more than physical. He watched Alina as she worked, his gaze filled with a dawning understanding. One afternoon he spoke. "You said the silence was screaming," he said thoughtfully. "What did you mean?" "I worked in an inner-city ER. It was never quiet. But the loudest thing was always the pain people couldn't put into words, the fear, the loneliness. That kind of silence is deafening." He was quiet for a long time. He looked toward the empty console table. "My silence," he began, his voice a whisper. "It was the sound of helicopter blades." Alina stood perfectly still, listening. "It was 7 years ago," he continued, his eyes lost in the past. "My wife, Amara, and my son, Omar, he was 12. They were flying to our mountain retreat. I was supposed to be with them, but a meeting ran late. A sudden storm, mechanical failure. There were no survivors." He spoke in a flat, dead tone, but his hand trembled uncontrollably. "I built this empire," he said, gesturing at the city. "I could control everything, but I couldn't control the weather. I couldn't keep them safe." And there it was, the heart of it all. It wasn't arrogance, it was monstrous, all-consuming grief and guilt. The rules were his penance, a desperate attempt to impose order on a chaotic universe. "The picture frames," Alina said softly. "That's where they were." He nodded, a single jerky motion. "I had them removed. I couldn't bear to look at them, but I can't bear the empty space either." He finally looked at her, his eyes swimming with unshed tears. The unbreakable patient was utterly broken. "You were right," he whispered. "The fortress doesn't work." Alina moved closer, and for the first time she placed her hand gently on his arm. He didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned into the touch, a silent surrender. The 7 rules simply evaporated. The next morning, Alina arrived to find 2 silver picture frames on the console table. One held a woman with a radiant smile, the other a young boy with his father's mischievous eyes. The sheikh wasn't in his chair. He was by the window, and he turned as she entered, offering a small, hesitant smile. "Good morning, Alina." The use of her first name was the beginning of a new era. The silence was replaced by conversation. He asked about her life, her family, her time in the ER. He listened, truly listened. In turn, he spoke of his son's love for astronomy and the dreams he had abandoned. A subtle romance began to blossom, built on quiet understanding and mutual respect. He was stunned by her authenticity, and she saw the kind, wounded man beneath the layers of power. He was re-engaging with life one step at a time, with Alina as his guide. She was no longer just his nurse, she was his confidant, his friend, and the anchor pulling him back to shore. The hospital hero had done more than save his life, he had given it back to him. As Khalid's strength returned, so did his ambition, but it was transformed. The drive to acquire had been replaced by a desire to create something meaningful. One evening he turned to her. "All of this," he said, gesturing to the city, "it feels hollow, just steel and glass. I want to build something that has a heart." He told her his new vision, to channel his immense resources into compassionate, human-centered healthcare, to empower the healers, the Alinas of the world. He announced, "I want to start a foundation, a global initiative to fund nursing scholarships and to champion the philosophy of care that you live by, to treat the person, not just the patient." He paused, then looked at her, "But it would be nothing without the person who inspired it. I want to call it the Harper Initiative, and I want you to run it with me." Alina was speechless. The unassuming nurse from a struggling hospital was now being asked to help shape the future of global healthcare. Her one act of choosing compassion over protocol had created a ripple effect that could now touch millions. They became partners, not just in life and love, but in a shared mission. The empathy she showed to one man could now become a legacy of healing for all.
In the end, it wasn't the billions of dollars or the cutting-edge medicine that healed Sheikh Khalid al-Jamil. It was one nurse who dared to see the man behind the patient. A nurse who understood that the most powerful rules are meant to be broken by the even more powerful force of human compassion. Alina Harper's story is a profound reminder that the greatest heroes are often the ones in the quiet rooms who, with a steady hand and an open heart, fight for the person nobody else can reach. It proves that one person, armed with nothing but courage and kindness, can truly change everything. Share this story with a nurse or a caregiver who has made a difference in your life, and let us know your own stories of compassion in the comments below. Thanks for watching.